They were talking about that. Well, if you didn't know, my name is Tim Attaway. I've been flying precision aerobatics since about 1989. And back in '89, when I was just starting out, I had the pleasure of seeing Chip Hyde come down to pattern contests down South Bay, close to the border. I watched him fly pattern airplanes. I watched him compete in the Worlds. I watched him fly pattern airplanes that looked a lot less like these. These are his current creations. Chip Hyde designed those. And he's always got new iterations coming up. So he's a very creative person. But I think I was grabbed by the beauty of seeing maneuvers done and with so elegant precision and smoothness. And I thought, that's something I hope to achieve. So back in the day, I bought ultimate biplanes and got 5 of those, Goldberg, and then the extra 300 came out. Those airplanes all had good flight characteristics. And some of them hark back to Leo Ladeslager's laser. She won the world championship. This is a replica of it. So this airplane, unlike many that you can find, has very few bad habits. So it's almost a perfect airplane in a lot of respects. And the pattern airplanes also have been designed so that all of the things that affect the flight of the airplane and the precision of the airplane are compromised out of it. No airplane will fly perfectly. But if you have an airplane that has a good design, has tapered wings, constant forward wings, symmetrical wings, center line, no dihedral. This is all in the design of the laser here. You have what starts to be an airplane that will just make you so happy to fly. It doesn't do anything you don't want it to do. And if you set it up correctly and make some small changes, set it up with good equipment, you won't be busy on the steps. You won't be correcting for what the airplane's trying to do on its own. So you can get really complicated, but I went online the last couple of days. So back in the day, Mike Chipchase from Australia designed a trimming sequence. It's about 8 or 9, 10 steps on how to get your airplane to fly better. This is the simplest one. You can get this downloaded off the internet. I didn't run up enough copies for 25 people. It tells you the first thing about setting up, if you have a good airplane, it has good equipment, then these prescribed steps will give you an airplane that makes you happy, flies straight and true, and you're not chasing it, you're not making corrections for tendencies that the airplane has. And once you fly an airplane like that, you're spoiled. You're spoiled forever. You don't want to fly an airplane that you have to chase that has sloppy gear on it, has sloppy control surfaces. You have then set yourself a higher standard for what you spend your time doing. So that's what this is all about. There's a couple of them here that I would suggest also off of the National Society of Radio Control Aerobatics is a pattern trimming chart by Mike Walpole. And I'll put these names up there in case you want to go online. It basically takes Mike Chipchase's thing, gives a little prologue about it, about what's important to think about, and then the steps. It's done nice and neat. It's 4 pages. And then the most complicated series of setup suggestions from Peter Goldsmith from Australia. I saw this in a magazine about 10 years ago, and it gets into some of the really esoteric, small little changes you can set up with your airplane. All of them, however, go with the basics, okay? So I'm just going to keep it simple. Once you have an airplane that has really good service, no slop anywhere in the service. This airplane costs $270, and the servos cost $300. 4 servos. Digital. I've had probably 400 or 500 flights on this airplane, and they're still strong, and they center, okay? And they center and they don't blow back. If you have a surface that has a weak servo on it, and you try to do a snap roll or a roll, and the thing is not strong enough to hold the surface, it will blow back, and you will get all sorts of screwy stuff. So what you need are the best servos that you can possibly afford. Don Lowe was at a pattern contest, and used to write an article for the magazine, and he said, spend money on the most powerful and accurate servo you can if you're going to fly. Put them on your ailerons, and then put them on your elevator. Because if you don't, the airplane, you'll be chasing the airplane. So, with that said, the first step is to come up with the center of gravity. And the test that I use, Pedro and I, and everybody else that flies any kind of aerobatics, you want to have the CG set up correctly. Once this airplane's got the strongest servo and everything, it's everything set up the way the book tells you to set it up, then you want the CG. So put your battery in and you start performing tests. You fly it back and forth. If you see that it has some tendencies when you're just flying it at the beginning, try to get those out. In other words, you might have an aileron that's up a little bit. You won't get a perfect airplane. You may have to have a little bit of trim in one of the ailerons. You may have to have a little trim. You may have to change the thrust on the motor. All those things are really complicated, but you know, at the start, you just want to make sure that the airplane flies as straight through as you can. You want to have some fun, right? So I'm not gonna complicate this thing too much, but what you do is take that airplane up and you fly it around, okay? And you're going to do a check for the CG, which is the balance point on the airplane, and you're going to pull to a 45 upline, and you're going to do a half roll, okay? So you're flying along, everything is happy, the airplane's functioning perfectly, you're going to pull to a 45 upline, and you're going to do a half roll the best you can. Make sure that you have the line established, and then let loose of all of your flying surfaces. Don't touch the elevator or anything. You should see, if you're going into the wind, you should see a gentle kind of curve that way. Just slightly dropping the nose as it goes up. And on a downwind, you do the same thing, half roll, and it will stay on that line longer going downwind. It eventually will start to drop. You need to perform that test until you get it just right, the battery's set, and you make a mark on there, and then you can always put it in there that way. Okay? Mouth is getting dry. So once the CG is set, then all of the surfaces. Yes.
One question. During the test, are you maintaining throttle over after that test?
Yes, you have throttle on.
Okay, so you go up, you're controlling it, and then you release everything, and let the throttle stay where it's at, see what it does.
Right. So Chip Davis and the other guys say there's other ways to perform CG tests. One other is to just roll to invert it. And if you have to use a lot of down elevator to hold the nose up, if you let loose of the elevator and the nose pitches down, it's pretty much nose heavy. And for flying precision, being a little nose heavy is not a bad thing because it spins better and it snaps better, and you can use a little pressure when you get inverted, and it has its benefits. So you don't want it to be completely neutral. You'd rather have it when you might have to have a little pressure to hold the nose up inverted. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay, so once you've established the CG, then you're going to be looking for what the airplane does on. Let's see, let me take a look at the other one. Scoot over. Center of gravity. Okay, roll model. So decollage. One thing that you want to make sure is that the wing is going to be the correct decollage or incidence. Some of the pattern airplanes are set up a little negative, and the stab is set up right on zero, and they adjust with the motor thrust to put a little tension in the airplane. They put those offline, but I would suggest just get that decollage as the plan says, and this is the test that I use to perform to see if the wing is zero or positive or negative. And so you push to a down line with no power, and you watch it on its down line, and if it starts to come out, then the wing is positive, right? The wing is positive. If it starts to go to the nose on just a power off straight down line, then the wing is off a little bit. This one is off a little bit, so what I did is put a little down on the ailerons. I set a little down on the ailerons to make it go straight down. Now there are a lot of other ways to work with decollage. Back in the day they would cut the wings off and they would do different things to get that perfect, but I just put a little bit of, program a little bit of okay, so if it tucks in, guess what? If it tucks in, that test, you want to do it the other direction, a little up on the ailerons. Okay. So the model starts to pull out, nose up, you reduce incidence, and if the model starts to tuck, you increase incidence. And most of these are adjustable. You can drill out your hole a little bit on one side and put a little epoxy in there and adjust. You can adjust the incidence that way too. That one has got an adjustable incidence on the main wing. And the stab, the stab, horizontal stab is also adjustable. You play with those things. Okay, going right down the line. As soon as I've got that airplane decollage is right and CG is correct, then I start balancing it for lateral. Notice what's on the wingtip. Okay, so the test for that is you can fly it inverted, and if you let it loose the sticks, the heavy wing will drop. And so you put washers, usually you put them inside the wing, but you play with the lateral balance of the airplane by putting a little weight on the wingtip. Yes?
Why do you have to test that while it's
Because it shows up better. There are other tests, and Chip Chase has got other tests that you can perform on it if you want to get really into it. But basically that's the way I test, where I just watch it, see if the wingtip drops from inverted flight. What kind of test do you do for that?
You can load it up too on a half a loop. Just load it up, and it'll go to the side.
You're right. One of the tests is to put a down line, and pull hard. If you pull hard at the bottom and the wing starts dropping, you do these tests more than just once. You take it into the wind. Basically, you don't do it on a crosswind. you do it into the wind, and you pull hard on a down like that, you'll see the wing dropping.
Now this is if everything else is good on the airflow, right?
Right.
Before you get to that test, you have to verify other things. So.
Right. So I use that other test for the, just put it inverted and watch it, and then the final test is to pull hard at the bottom of a down line. Okay, we're on step 5 already, okay? Step 6, elevator alignment. So some of these airplanes have one servo on the elevator, and some have 2. That one has 2 over there. So you need to make sure that these, when you set them up, I've often checked out a person's airplane, and I'll look there, and one got you can see the exposure of the wing or the elevator. It's different from left to right. This will be up a little bit, this will be down a little bit, this will be warped a little bit. Anything like that will create a problem in flying straight and true. So there's several tests to perform. Fly model away from you and into any wind, pull into an inside loop or vertical climb. Roll inverted and repeat pushing it into an outside loop or vertical climb. So I would take it out and I would fly it, not in the crosswind here. I probably would be going like this. And I would fly it and pull, and you'd see if it was corkscrewing off one way or the other. If the elevator halves are not matched. Okay? So it's even more, it shows up even more if you invert it and do an outside loop. So if you're doing, here's the wind, and you're doing an outside loop, and you pull hard, and you see the airplane screwing off one way or the other. And if you want to do the maximum test, you do an outside loop, and then it'll show up even more to see if your elevator has. If you set the airplane up properly, you're looking at it, and you see the same exposure on this side and this side. And by the way, the exposure of the wings, the main wings, I always look to see if there's warp in the wing too. If there's any warp in the wing, you can see a difference of exposure on the right to the exposure on the left. And always from the bottom of the airplane, I always look like this to see if they are the same. Okay? You can, if the elevator halves are not matching, this is one of the basic tools of setting up an airplane. You put it on the surface, you set it at 0, and then you deflect it at low rates, medium rates, high rates, and you check to see that you're getting the same throw on both elevator halves. Just call it an incidence meter, it's like $20.
Oh, digital.
They got the digital one.
That's just showing
off.
Actually, Tim's works really good for the field, better than
It does what you need it to do, and it's so simple. Here, take that.
Tim, can I mention something that we noticed on one of Eric's planes last week?
Sure.
A lot of these models, especially the wood ones, they have these balances here on the front of the elevator that will help reduce some of the force as you're doing deflection. Eric had a plane out here last week where both sides were lined up at the front, but yet the back side of the elevators, there were more than a half-inch different because of a twist in the wood. And every time he would put it into a loop, it would drop that right wing and it would spin out. So one thing to look at also, as Tim said, always make sure that you get a look from the back of the airplane. And I actually like to set mine up before I even put the rudder up. That way I've got it straight across. I tape a piece of carbon fiber rod on each side, and then as they're going up and down, I look to make sure that they're both going the same. And even at full deflection, we've had a couple where someone was one servo short, so they bought a new servo that matched what they had, and the older servo at full deflection was a half-inch off from the newer servo. So that's one thing to look at also when you have an elevator that's split and you have a servo on each side. Even though they match in the middle, you need to make sure that they match through the full travel. And this little incidence meter is your ticket there. And I always keep 2 in my truck, so if you're here and you need one, just let me know. I'll let you use it. Thank you.
You use a pair of dowels.
Right, you can put. I've attached these dowel on both sides and watch, and then work the elevator all the way to its extreme. It should match. The dowel should be right out here, right, and then you just match them up. Yeah. And you can put them to the. You can actually put them to the center, like Pedro and I have done in the past. And there's all sorts of things to make sure that if you haven't set that thing up and forgotten to do these basic checks. Okay. Now, dihedral, tip weight, they give you some more sophisticated ways to check to see if the airplane it doesn't have a heavy wing. It's going to fly straight and level and not drop a wingtip on number. And then dihedral, fly the model straight and level into the wind, apply rudder, and watch for any tendency for the model to roll. This is one of the key things for setting up the airplane. Before I go into that though, how many of you here know what dual rates are?
Dual rates.
How many of you here think you know what exponential is? Okay. How many of you use no exponential?
Some point.
Okay. How many of you use dual rates? Okay. How many of you have flight modes?
Flight
Flight
modes?
modes.
Flight modes.
Okay, so there's a level of sophistication here, okay? If you're using exponential, the proper amount is really basically up to you. You want to soften the way that the surfaces that you're using to fly the airplane with precision, you want to soften them around the center, and the exponential will do that. Okay, so what is the proper amount? There's no set amount. A really good flyer friend of mine said 25% on aileron, 25% or so on elevator is what he used. He used the Zuber boys. That's what they use. How much do you set up yours with? 35?
It depends. The latest one, I was going like up to 45 and getting rid of all the switches.
Yeah, gets the airplane to settle down, right? So, talking about sophistication in terms of exponential, you want to set up, to start with, I would suggest 30% on all flying surfaces to slow it down around the center so it's not twitchy. Okay? As far as dual rates are concerned, dual rates are really a thing of the past. When we used to fly pattern airplanes, you have 2 switches you had 3 switches. You had a rudder switch, you had an elevator switch, and you had an aileron switch. Well, I'm here to tell you that you want it on one switch, right? This gives me low rates, and we'll show you what it looks like. Let's get it on the right airplane. Go ahead and talk if you think you've got something to add. Steve Dente is really good at trimming. Ray's good at trimming. Pedro and I have been trimming airplanes for a long time. Go ahead while I get this thing set up. Do you have anything to say?
The only thing about switches is when you initially set up an airplane, your initial setup, go ahead and program as many switches as you want. You want to go up there and try one, try just the ailerons, play around with those. But once you're competing, the least amount of switches you can use, the best. And I got to the point where I'm not flicking any switches at all. I just have a bunch of expo in it and go up. Sometimes I'll switch one for the stall turns, and that's about it. But just try and keep it simple. The more you keep it simple, the better, and the more you practice, the better you get. That's really the key. Fly as much as you can.
I have all mine set up with 3 rates, flight modes, and I complete just one of them, and the other two are just for 3D stuff. And then I have an extra switch for the rudder. Like he said, the only time I want to max out the airplane for precision is installed through. Everything else is maximized to give me nice, even flight, still do a proper snap. If you do that, you don't need to switch. See?
Okay, so you see this airplane. You probably see me fly it. I fly on, most of the time I fly on low rates. That would be with this little toggle slit. It's got the little rubber thing on there so I can feel it, right? It's right on my left index finger. So this is my throw, maximum throw that I need to do most of my flying.
Precision.
Base precision. Basically, we're talking about 20 degrees of deflection up on the ailerons, but this one probably a little less. About 11 or 12 degrees of deflection on the elevator. A little more on the down, because the rudder has an effect on it. You want to have a little bit more down, maybe an extra degree. And this comes in handy when you have that. Okay? So rudder, not very much, huh? I can do a knife edge indefinitely with that setting. How much deflection is that? 12 degrees maybe? So on lowest setting, flight mode 1, and then flight mode 2, here's a full deflection. You can see everything go up a little bit. See that? And then if I want to do 3, if I want to do snap rolls, this is the one when I have an aggressive snap roll where I have to do 2 consecutive snaps, positive or negative, on an upline. You don't want the airplane coming offline, so you go up to a second level for doing snap rolls aggressive style. Okay, so there's basic.
Well,
Go back to 0. Go back to 0.
we can find out. We all have these angle gauges.
Yeah.
We put them on all our surfaces, so we get everything perfect match.
So I'm flying only with 15 degrees of deflection on the ailerons. And the elevators doesn't look like it's more than 10.
Put it.
Okay. Yep. 11. Okay. 11 up. Probably about 12 down. So if I want to monkey around, this is what I use, the deflection I use. If I want to do crazy gyroscopic stuff, this is maximum throw. And that's all on one switch. They always work 100% of the time. You don't have to fiddle around with, okay, I think I'm going to do elevator, so I'm going to put elevator, my dual rate elevator on and just go, that. You have to find that switch all the time. It's not much fun. And you want to keep it simple for yourself. If you've done all these things that I've just talked about right now, your airplane will calm down and make you a lot happier.
How many of you have a radio that has flight modes? It's not everybody, so all of you could be doing this.
How many are using flight modes now? Okay.
Are you using the same expo on all of your radio
No, you can
modes?
set it up differently. You can modify that all the way up and down the line. As you go up and throw, I usually go up in exponential a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe 5%.
You want to get the feel the same around the middle on every mode that you fly in. So obviously you'll increase as you go up in your range, right? It also depends what kind of flying you're doing. If you're doing aggressive 3D stuff, you might not want as much exponential because that's the way you want to fly. If you're flying precision, you just need it.
Yes, when you use dual rates, if they are organized dual 3D, reflections, then you come down and say the lower rate. Do you lose precision there because the server doesn't travel as well?
that has to do also with the initial setup. You know, you set up a plane basically of what you're going to use the plane for. If you're strictly using it for precision, you use the full travel of the throw of the servo for a small amount of degrees, right? And then you get a ton of precision on that. If you're doing 3D, then you're going to lose some precision down on the low end. So it's give and take.
In order to accomplish that is the length of your servo arm, right, in proportion to the length of the control surface arm. So what you want to do is have full stick movement with small movements in the plane. That increases your resolution.
What he's talking about is, notice I'm not on that on the outer hull. The closer I am to the shaft, the better resolution I'll get.
Can you turn it this way?
Taller. This one's usually a lot longer, the horn, and the output shaft off the servo is closer to the hole because that gives you better resolution and more power. If you put a really long servo arm on there, you just reduce the amount of ounce-inches power that your servo has. You cut it in half. If you go to 1.5 inches or, you know, to get wild and crazy surface deflection, you're going to invite what? Blowback. That servo won't work. It won't snap back to its original. The servos on this and all these pattern airplanes and what have you see have the ability to actually deflect without any blowback and then return to zero and bring that airplane back onto position quicker and more positively because it doesn't have any blowback.
Also, in your radios, you can set how much movement each click of your trims in most radios. Are you all aware of that? So you can increase and decrease the resolution of your radio also. Most of us, when we're doing that, we take off on our trim flights, we leave a rather large amount of effect for each click. And as we get more and more dialed in, we start reducing the amount of movement per click so that we're really getting fine-tuning at the end. So most of you don't know that you probably have that capability in your radios.
Trim steps.
Trim steps.
It's up
Yep.
1 through 4 on some of them.
1 through
Mine.
4 manufacturer labels it differently, but you should learn to use that. Start out with a maiden with relatively big steps, and by the time you're dialing it in close, you're on really small steps.
Okay, so there are some really esoteric things in the information I've got in that thing. Peter Goldsmith gets really into it. If you want to look up Peter Goldsmith's on the internet and ask for his trimming guide, because it's about 8 pages long. It's not a step-by-step thing, but if you really are into this and want to know more about it, how it works, he's the guy to check out. So we have an airplane that's comfortably set up with good CG, etc., and control surfaces that's balanced. And now we're looking at something called roll coupling. Anybody here ever hear of roll coupling? Raise your hand. Roll coupling. What causes roll coupling? Okay. Anybody else? Anybody have any idea? So, when roll coupling occurs, when the rudder is deflected, you put yaw onto an airplane. So, the best way to find out whether your airplane is set up properly is to take it off and put it at half throttle and try to do a circle just like this with just rudder. Okay, that is the premier test. There are other tests, but the premier test, the one that's easiest to do, is to just take off and go into the wind and use right rudder to turn the airplane. And as you see it turn, it's perfect if it doesn't roll out. Okay? If instead the nose drops, okay, that's roll coupling. When you throw rudder, the yaw treatment of that on the rudder causes the nose to drop, and you have to use up elevator to hold it up all the way. That's roll coupling on the pitch axis. Okay? It also will show you adverse or proverse roll due to the ailerons. So if you do that test and it starts to roll out, it rolls to the left, that's adverse roll. If it turns and goes and drops, that's proverse roll. You don't want the right wingtip dropping, and you don't want the left wingtip dropping in that test, do you? Okay. Why is that important? Well, whenever you're doing anything precision and you use the rudder at all, guess what? That rolling coupling effect causes you to be busy. And it's axiomatic. You do not want to be busy. So you want to get rid of that. Okay? So the other test is you put it on a knife edge, which is a little more difficult procedure than to do just a circle, a flat circle. But you will see it under power. You'll see as you more rudder you apply, you'll see it either go away from you or go to the wheels, or it'll come towards you and come to your nose. And all the airplanes I've ever flown always seem to need a little bit of up elevator or down elevator mixed with rudder. Okay? So when I throw right rudder to hold the line, it will go to the wheels. So I put about 2 or 3 degrees, units of percentages of up elevator to whichever rudder I want. Rudder, right rudder or left rudder. Sometimes it can be different. Left rudder you might have a little less. Right rudder you might. It's usually what, about 4 to 5 percentage points, guys?
Yeah, about
4 or 5 to get
Very
it
small.
And then, okay, once you get it doing that, then it might start. The wing might start rolling out or rolling in. So what do? If it rolls to the right on knife edge, you're going to put in a little bit of what? Left aileron in your program to hold that line.
So these are mixes. How many of you guys have ever programmed mixes before?
Good. Programming mixes in these computer radios are so simple.
But really important, before you get into the mixes, make sure you spend a lot of time trimming out the airplane, because mechanically you can get rid of most of these things. When you get to your mixes, it's very little, because if you go right for the mixes, yeah, your airplane will fly okay, but it'll show up problems in all kinds of other different areas of your flight, and you'll be chasing them all day long.
Along that line, Peter Goldsmith says, if you change the prop, if you change the motor thrust, if you do anything along the way while you're doing this procedure, you have to go back to square one and start setting everything up. So if you do a lot of testing, a lot of flying with the preliminaries, then as Pedro says, the nightmares are a lot less, and the airplane's a lot less busy when you go to clicking in the computer to make those adjustments, those roll coupling. You want the smallest amount of roll coupling before you start making that setting. Remember, if you change props, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, put the battery in a little different. Okay, if you put the battery, make it nose heavy, guess what you just did? You're back to square one in a lot of ways. So you need to know where to put that battery. I actually have a mark on mine. If you look at my pattern airplane, you'll see it's a series of marks there where I put the batteries to get the CG correct.
I'll also say that it's a never-ending. Every contest we ever go to, in the morning, everyone's up doing flights and changing these things really subtly for that day's contest. It just, for some reason, you never get finished. But
What happens in a flat turn with the rudder if it rolls in or out?
put a mix in.
Aileron mix.
Rudder to aileron. Rudder is master, aileron is...
Roll coupling test, so simple. Take it up, medium power, and just try to do a circle on the horizontal. Bring it back without touching elevator or aileron. Once you see what it's dropping, then you need to do roll coupling programming. Most airplanes will have some sort of roll coupling. And it also is, it is tied to how much power you put on it, right? This is not, the speed and the P factor on the motor pull, there's all sorts of interesting things that are going on up there. But at about half throttle, you should be able to see what your tendencies are to get rid of any roll coupling issues.
high does a lot of throttle to rudder mixes.
He said, yeah, and I mean, Peter Goldsmith says if you're on a 45 down line and you're off power, then the motor's not pulling the airplane to the right, and you'll find a wingtip drop. So he's got a mix for that. And Chip Hyde, he's the
Lives on his
guru.
throttle.
He sets everything up 0, and then he programs in right rudder to counteract the motor thrust. Instead of setting up 2.5 degrees, which is most pattern airplanes, they set it off to the right to counteract the pull of the prop disc. It will pull like this, so they set up the motor 2.5 degrees to the right, so it'll go straight up and not go off to the left.
That's just
Chip goes, okay,
designed for
forget that.
power setting.
Well, Chip is crazy.
Chip,
Yeah.
we could tell stories about Chip,
With
but
his
Chip
mixes.
goes, he just sets it up 0, and he says, I'll program that out. I'll just put 3 degrees of right thrust as on full throttle.
When that throttle was new, I took one of those to a contest up in Central California where Chip was at, and I was winning. And Chip came when I was out. I got called to judging. And when I came back from judging, Chip had my plane apart and the radio reprogrammed his one. Never asked me. And I didn't win that last round because that plane didn't do anything I expected it to do. And so all of this is very personal. It sounds like there's a right way and a wrong way.
There isn't.
Like when I do my rudder trimming, I'm almost always doing it knife edge rather than flat. That's my preferred way to do my rudder mixes.
Basically, what you feel comfortable with is how you should trim your airplane.
So, I mean, these rules are all adopted for your own personal flying style and your personality. And don't leave your radio around if Chip. All I'm going to say.
Okay, so any questions at this point? Yes. Aileron differential is the next subject. Okay. So, one test that I like, yes.
I want to go back to flight modes.
Mm-hmm.
What flight modes do you use with pattern planes? I'm familiar with them for gliders, but I've never thought of using one on a pattern plane.
So, flight modes for most precision flyers, you want it set calm, so the airplane is calm and draws straight lines, so it doesn't do anything really quick. But when you have an aggressive snap, you want to probably go to a higher setting, to setting number 2 to do a snap. You have to come back, right? Especially if it's on a vertical. Also, when you are approaching to do a spin, when you pull it into the wind, you're just going to spin it in. Sometimes you need a little more elevator there to get the nose to actually drop and go into the spin. And then when you're doing a stall turn, you're going up and you're keeping the power on and stop, and you want to do a stall turn like this. You basically want the maximum rudder that you can come up with. So I go to my 3rd setting, my 3D setting, at the top of the stall, at the top of a hammerhead, to get the tail to go.
But the wind will help also.
The what?
The wind.
Well, you'll stall turn into the wind.
Yeah. When you stall it.
Well,
But
it's anywhere you do a stall pin. In a contest, they'll have you do one right out in front of you, over here. Doesn't matter. You basically need to do a stall turn by going straight up, keep the power on, and then hit your flight mode setting to the highest level, and while the power's still on, kick to the right or left.
you know why the power's on, guys?
You have to, you have
Well,
to use
so
the rudder
the
to
stall
kick it
turn at the
over.
top, you're not rising anymore, right? Because if you're still going up and you do a stall turn, you're going to do a
At the
arc.
ring over.
You're supposed to pivot. So you need the airflow from the prop to hit the rudder to cause the pivot, right? So how much throttle do you use? The same amount that you would use in a hover.
About half.
Speaking of the flight modes, to answer your question, each of us probably have a different system of the flight modes. I have 3 plus a rudder switch. I have my precision, I have my stalls, and I have a more aggressive in case it's windy. And then I have my flip for the rudder. So I have 3 flight modes and a rudder switch.
I have 1 flight mode, 1 rudder switch. That's it.
Okay, so
Pins got to it.
one thing I forgot to show you guys is how much roll coupling programming I have on this airplane. This is an almost perfect airplane in a lot of ways. The center wing placement, no dihedral. You've got a nice big thing here and the tall vertical stab. It's a great design airplane. But I want you to notice when I throw rudder here, what's happening. Let's see. Okay, this is right rudder. You see any movement? The right aileron is going down about 1 degree. See it moving?
You can see the reflection on it change just a touch. Yep.
This, and I can barely see the elevator moving. This airplane is so good. It's moving about a degree, and that's right and left rudder.
Makes a huge difference, that degree.
So I want to make that point. If you have to put in a lot, then it's either not a very good airplane, or you haven't got it set up right, or you're fighting the airplane. This airplane, like I said, 400 or 500 flights. I never mess around with it because the final test for me on any airplane to see what the settings are and if they're going to work for me is to do an 8-point roll on the airplane. Because when you do an 8-point roll, you got all the P-force of the prop pulling, trying to pull you offline, and any kind of roll coupling that's happening, you're be using rudder the whole way, right? So every time you do a quarter roll on an 8-point roll going up, and you start getting busy, you either don't have enough power with the motor, or something's wrong with your setup. This airplane, I can do an 8-point roll anywhere on a 45 line, vertical line, a down line, anything like that. It doesn't come offline and it doesn't get screwed. That's what makes me happy.
How many of you guys use your rudder on all your flights? You gotta learn to live and die by the rudder.
On a straight line, you should be using your rudder all
Everywhere.
the time.
Pedro and I and Tim went to a contest in Yuma. We had a cross, remember that? Our uplines, because they judge you on a straight vertical line. It doesn't matter which way your plane is pointed. It's the straightness of the line that it travels you judge, right? Our uplines looked like this.
That's not the attitude of the airplane, it's the line.
Seriously, we were leaned over that far. And so try and calculate how you roll when you do that. Right? Think of the math in your head. Right?
Just give me a 0 and get it over with.
Right? That's what you have. That's what we had to remember that.
Just give me a 0.
I've had to line across runways at Tucson shootout runs. That was the only way to get that plane. Crosswinds.
Okay, so I'm pretty much.
Let's fly some and show people.
I think that's about enough that you need to know for the basics, and that's probably overload. But this little thing gets a little bit complicated if you like to do that kind of stuff. It's called a K-factor trim chart by Michael Chipchase, and I'll put it on the whiteboard here in case you want to get a piece of pencil and paper and copy it down eventually.